We are in the midst of early voting here in New York City. I am actually going to be my vote plan is to have me vote this afternoon or on Saturday morning. It depends on a couple things that are happening, but I have a vote plan because people like you who have been in office for some time now have really encouraged more, I think, of us to use the law to our personal advantage in ways that will allow our communities to really benefit. But talk to us about why you are seeking to be the mayor of New York City, particularly because you have really been an effective legislator at the state level. What draws you to City Hall?
Well, let me say thank you again for having me on the show, and it really is an honor. You're someone I tell you this personally, but like to say it publicly, someone that I admire and that I look up to. And every lawyer that goes to law school to do some good hopes that they can be you when they grow up. And so, thank you for the work that you do. And I've been really serious about my job in the state legislature. I represent currently the same community that I was born and raised in, and I've always grounded my work in doing the things that my community needs and using the law to achieve that. And I think that the same can be applied to City Hall. We are facing a number of crises before us today. We have an affordability crisis where people cannot afford a place to stay in this city. We have a childcare crisis where people cannot access childcare. We got some public safety issues that are driven largely by our kids not having opportunities. And part of what I want to do in the paradigm shift that I'm trying to engender is to say that City Hall can be a force for good in our lives. It can be a force to help us have a place to live. And it's why I want 1 million homes over the next 10 years of all types to bring down the cost of living. It's part of why I want to extend universal pre-K and 3K from 2:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. because most people don't get off at 2:30 p.m. And it's why I want universal after school. I was a part of an institution not too far from where you work, the Crown Heights Youth Collective, that kept me off the streets, that allowed for my mom to keep putting food on the table. And I think every kid in the city should have that opportunity. We talk about gun violence. This is something that I have fought against in the legislature pretty vigorously, and I want to do something from City Hall. I want to solve every single shooting. I reject the premise that we have to live with gun violence, and solving those crimes helps drive it down as well. And so I'm excited about the vision. I've been at the train stations, I've been at the poll sites. Early voting has already started. We got close to 100,000 people that have already voted in the city. And it's a really exciting time, particularly given what we see coming from the federal government. People are using this opportunity to use the franchise as an expression of what they want to see in their leadership. I'm excited to be one of those options.
I got to be honest with you. A few days ago, we hosted the mayoral debate, a watch party for the mayoral debate in Brooklyn. And there were several people there who had you in their top five. And then after that debate experience, you navigated up to their top one. And y'all remember here in New York City, we are ranked choice voting. So we get to rank our top five candidates for our city council, our borough presidents, assuming there are at least three people running, of course, and our mayor, so our comptroller. So we have a lot of options here. And so you definitely were highly discussed at that debate watch party, and your plan to expand after school programming with extended pre-K. All the parents were like, "Yes, Lord, come now, sweet Jesus." That is exactly what we need. And the idea of 1 million homes. Talk to us about that because we at the Center for Law and Social Justice, y'all know that's where my actual job is at. This is just the brunch break that we all get to have with each other every day. But at my actual job, we have been very concerned about increasing instability in the economy because of what that typically indicates for foreclosures. And we know that our communities tend to be the ones that suffer from foreclosures most aggressively. And we are often the canaries in the coal mine. Talk to us about this plan to build 1 million units of housing. What would that look like? And how would you get it done as mayor?
Yeah, and thank you for that. And a shout out to the folks that are watching the debate and being engaged. And this is quite a bizarre experience if you're the candidate when you're on the stage and you're trying to read the vibes of the room, but talk to the people that are watching. And I tried my best to communicate as clearly as I could about our vision. And so I'm glad that it was landing for folks. This is an issue that I have been fighting for in the legislature. You talked about the threats of foreclosure. This is something that you've mentioned on this show. The exodus of Black homeowners in this city over the past 10 years. And we saw this with our work around the census, close to 200,000, which was due in no small part to what we saw on foreclosure and deed theft. So part of what I want to do in my housing plan is not just the creation of new units, but the preservation of what we have right now. And that includes assistance, right to counsel that is extended not just for renters that are facing eviction, but for homeowners that are facing deed theft and foreclosure. I want to extend that protection so that they can have all the tools that they need in order to stay there. I also want to make it easier to build housing that does put people on the path to ownership and that is affordable. Right now, if you are a developer and you want to develop 15, 20 stories, the city makes it relatively easy for you to do that. But if you want to build 7 stories and below, if you want to build something that is bigger for families, the city makes it pretty hard. There's a lot of bureaucracy around it, and there's no access to capital. Developers that look like you and I, who often are smaller developers, don't have that access. So I want to use the city's Housing Development Corporation to provide some of that access to capital. So we're building housing that is affordable for our families. You know, part of this is a supply demand problem. If we have more supply, then, you know, we don't have 1 or 2 landlords that get to charge whatever they want. But everywhere is not going to look the same. And there are certain neighborhoods that have had to bear the brunt of development while others have not. This is a dynamic that has played out in my own district, where I was born and raised on our side of Prospect Park. Over the past 10 years, there have been about 4,000 units created. On the other side of Prospect Park, in neighborhoods like Windsor Terrace, that number is closer to 200. And so when there was a proposal for development in that
Wait,
neighborhood, I came
200 or 200,000?
200, 200, 200.
So wait, on one side of the park, it was 4,000 units. On the other side, it was 200.
That part, that part.
Ooh.
So when there was a proposed development on that side of the park, I came out in support. And I said, look, yeah, this is a great neighborhood, close to the park, close to good schools, close to transportation. Who wouldn't want to be a part of this? I supported it. And I got some real colorful language from my constituents on that side of the park saying that I couldn't step foot in that neighborhood. I said, well, you know, first of all, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm going to step wherever I please.
We
But
we go where we
also,
go.
exactly. But also, you hear that type of language that has been used. We are very familiar with what that is and how that sounds. And so I think that once every neighborhood is a part of our affordability solution, then we're going to see some of those pressure valves that have pushed on particular neighborhoods not be as intense. And so, you know, people have said, "Are you prepared to have neighborhoods hate you? This is a radical plan. How are you going to do it?" And I said, if you take the alternative that you cannot afford a place to stay, you got to leave the city, you can't raise a family, then we're really going to hollow out the middle and working class in this city. And that is a premise that I reject. And so I'm trying to do the big thing here.
And sometimes the big thing causes us to have to be uncomfortable with change, and we got to do the big thing anyway. I saw some footage of you recently. I believe it was at I believe it was the Puerto Rican Day Parade. I don't think we've had the Dominican Parade. I think it was the Puerto Rican Day Parade recently, and you were there. And now I'm going to describe what you look like to the audience because they're not going to see this video unless Jonah gets it up today. They're probably not going to see this video until tomorrow. But you look like if we were walking down the street, like your name could be Kahim Jenkins. Like you look like a black man. You were perceived to be a black man, and that would speak to your racial affinity and the racial group that you're a part of. But you were at the Puerto Rican Day Parade and you said some things about your identity that I think shocked a couple of people. Talk to us about how your race and perhaps your ancestral lineage may confuse people who have a very limited understanding as to the very many ways that race functions in society. Talk to us a little bit about who your family is and where you come from.
Excellent, excellent question. So both of my parents are from Limon, Costa Rica, and a little bit about the history of Limon in Costa Rica. When the British Empire abolished the enslavement of human beings in the 19th century, Jamaica was a former colony. Myrie is a Jamaican surname, and my ancestors were enslaved in the province of Westmoreland. They made their way from Jamaica to Costa Rica because they were trying to look for a job, for employment, to try to put food on the table. And at the time, Costa Rica was building a railroad across the country. So they were going for temporary work in Limon to build that railroad, and they never left. They stayed. And that Caribbean influence has remained. And so, even up until this day, every single year in Limon, there is a parade called Dia del Negro, where you have a bunch of the Caribbean diaspora make their way to Costa Rica to talk about their African ancestry, to celebrate their Caribbean heritage. And this was actually something my dad was involved in creating. And part of my own political activism was based in my dad experiencing racism back in Costa Rica as a Black and as an Afro Latino, and wanting to ensure that I never felt less Black than anyone else. And so
Mm.
when I talk to people about being Afro Latino, and when I talk about my Caribbean heritage, I do get sometimes this puzzling look because people are unused to that configuration. But it is something that I am incredibly proud of. And come on, I grew up in Flatbush. I'm from Brooklyn. This is what we do. We have such a diverse African diaspora, and that includes the Caribbean, and that includes our Caribbean provinces in Latino countries.
I appreciate you explaining that. And it gives me an opportunity to remind people that, y'all, let's not forget, less than 5% of the Africans who were kidnapped and trafficked through the transatlantic slave trade actually came to the United States of America. The vast majority of them went to Spanish and Portuguese and French speaking colonies and English speaking colonies outside of what we now know as the United States. And that's an important thing because we're in a world where these borders, as somebody in power has once described them, these imaginary lines. Yeah, all borders are basically imaginary lines that people with power and weapons put into place. And so it's important that we recognize the connections that we have, as well as the beauty of the diversity of our city. And your story is really emblematic of a whole lot of New Yorkers. Like that's basically like how a lot of us got to this space. I was at a reparations hearing the other day, and somebody was mad at something I said. It was like, "Well, you're Jamaican," and I was like, technically on my mama's side, that is true, but my daddy's from Brooklyn by way of South Carolina. So, like, we are literally in this space of constant engagement. And that actually brings us now to a conversation I want to have in light of what we're seeing taking place in places like Los Angeles. We recently were informed by the president and this regime that they are now in an effort to spread the chaos that they sent to Los Angeles into cities like New York City, Chicago, and other major cities. Traditionally, these are cities that tend to be very majority non-white and tend to be led by not a majority of white people, at least in the elected leadership. And we saw in places like Omaha, Nebraska, that just had an election where the mayor, a Democrat, won that seat, first black person to sit in the seat of mayor in Omaha. And the very next day, they get an ICE raid. And so New York City has been targeted with this sort of manipulation of what's happening with immigrants to this country for a long time. We saw it with Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, and Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, who basically shuffled and bussed and airlifted. I called it trafficking because that's just how I saw it. But they basically took people who had entered the country seeking asylum and then sent them to places like Chicago, sent them by the bus loads, by the plane loads to places like New York City. Talk to us about what it will be like for you to sit in the seat as mayor and having to balance the needs of the long-term residents of this city, balancing the needs of migrants who are coming to this city, and thinking about what that looks like within the while you're essentially sitting in the crosshairs of a president like the one we currently have leading the country.
It is, I think, one of the most important issues that are going to face the next occupant of City Hall. And it's something that is very personal to me. We've been talking about my family history, and my parents were not documented when they had me here in New York City. But they still felt like they could take me to Kings County Hospital. I have very bad asthma, as a lot of us do. And they could come to my PTA meetings. They could show up, pick me up to school because they knew the city wasn't going to deport them or assist in that deportation. This is in the Rudy Giuliani era, and he was a big proponent of our sanctuary city status because even he understood, and this was before things went left or right, however you want to characterize it. He understood what this community meant. We're talking 3 million New Yorkers that were born in another country. We do not exist as a
Wow.
city. without our immigrant community. I quite literally would not exist, but many of us would not be here if not for that. And so we're going to have to, I think, have an all of the above approach to this next administration. One, what we're seeing being done out in LA and in other jurisdictions, and you can appreciate this, I believe is flat out unconstitutional. Even the statutes that are being used are, I think, being used in an unprecedented way. They're being used in a way that really bends the principle of why these statutes were enacted. Some of them are almost 200 years old, but this administration has demonstrated that they don't care much for precedent. So I think that we have to have a two-pronged approach. One, I want to hire more lawyers for our law department so that we are going on the offensive for any of the cuts that they're going to use to try to bribe us into enacting their policy. I think that the 10th Amendment has been underutilized in this administration and across the country. I think New York City could be a leader in that. And for those who are not familiar, the 10th Amendment effectively says that we are not required by the Constitution to carry out the federal government's policies. I want to go on the offensive in using that because we've seen in other contexts, in the civil rights context, we saw the NAACP and many others revolutionize the use of the 14th Amendment so that we can get the appropriate case law to give us the equal protection that we have now. I think we have an opportunity to do that with the 10th Amendment to go on the offensive. But I also think we got to utilize this bully pulpit. This is the media capital of the world. It is no coincidence that Trump uses big cities as a stage for his worst instincts. He is going to use New York City or attempt to use New York City to demonstrate to his most rabid supporters that this is what they elected him to do. So we got to fight back and we got to use the same bully pulpit to say we will not accept this in New York City. We got to be clear to our city institutions, like our schools, like our hospitals, that you will not be coordinating with the federal government. And listen, we are a city of many opinions. A lot of people feel a lot of different ways. And I think that there is a real current of, well, what have you done for me? Someone that has been here. What has the government provided? How have you helped me get a leg up? And I think we can do both things at the same time. If I'm focused on affordability and safety and opportunity, I think people are going to say that is good. And we also want you to stand up for our immigrant community. We got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And that's what I plan to do as mayor.